Darryl, one of the most recent brawlers to fall into the drastic F tier, mainly because he got destroyed by hypercharges and because his hit just simply got weaker over time, while other characters in the F tier received crazy reworks that might have made them a little too strong, while others received a couple buffs throughout the time and some of them even a lot of buffs. But Darryl, he has just been forgotten. So today, I'm here to change that. Hopefully, with these changes, Darryl will be back at least to the A tier, because honestly, he's such a fun brawler that I used to play so much, and I just miss him a lot. So, starting off, let's start with a very basic one. His super self-charge will be increased from 30 seconds to 20 seconds. So, Kit gets a 2 damage, a jump, and a longer range on his super, and a stun for 2 seconds, and he only needs to wait 20 seconds. While Darryl, he gets a tiny roll that gives him a 50% shield, and he has to wait 30 seconds. That's honestly crazy. Like, you just need to wait so much time. Like, playing Darryl, unless you hit your first gadget, it feels like you're playing Edgar without the first gadget. It just simply does not make sense unless you play him on very short range maps, which he's not even that good because he just simply does not have the aggressivity that he needs to survive in those maps. So, the second thing that I want to do is again with the super. The shield from the actual super will be increased from 50% up to 80%. So, a long time ago, Darryl had a rework where his super shield was actually 90% for a short amount of time, and that made him the best brawler in the game. That was before hypercharges being a thing, and 90% is actually a lot. Like, you used to be pretty much immortal when you rolled into someone, which is actually crazy. So, let's pretend a little bit that he's bull hypercharge and give him the 80% shield, because 50% shield might work for some brawlers like Chuck, because his super is just so easily cyclable, but Darryl, he cannot really cycle his super that much, so 80% shield sounds fair enough. And to not make him very broken, and because I want his tankiness to come from his super, now his HP will be reduced from 10,600 to only 10,000. The tankiness should come from his super and not as much from his HP, because I feel like with all of these shields and a little bit the super cycle, he'll be a way much better tank and also a little bit of a better assassin. Now that we already talked about his baseline kit, let's talk about star powers and gadgets, because all of them are getting changed. So, start off, his first star power will just get a simple buff. The shield will be increased from 25% to 30%, and the duration will be increased from 2 seconds to 2 seconds and a half. A very simple buff, but I feel like it will make this star power slightly better, because even with this star power, Darryl is not really that tanky, and also the HP nerf would do a little bit of harm to this star power effectivity, so this tiny buff should compensate that. His second star power would be completely removed, and now he would have a new second star power called Bouncy Barrel. So, if your super hits a wall, the remaining range of that super gets tripled. So, your super has 7 tiles of range. So, if you hit at a wall, let's imagine like it's impossible to get exactly 7 tiles of range, but imagine you would still have 6 tiles of range. You would now roll 18 tiles. This would give a lot more agility to Darryl, obviously sacrificing that extra tankiness from the first star power, and I honestly feel like it would be a pretty hard choice. And this star power is also fairly easy to balance. If triple is too much, then maybe do 2 times and a half. But I feel like triple is exactly what he needs, because Darryl is supposed to be an assassin, and assassins are supposed to be agile, and I mean, he's not really that agile. His first gadget, the projectile speed, would be increased by 24%. So in case you don't know if I am correct, this gadget used to have the same projectile speed as Darryl's old projectile speed, so before he even had that buff on the projectile speed, so the gadget would have the same thing. and the charge rate that you gain from each shell would be increased from 25% to 33%. So this gadget would be also a lot helpful to cycle the super, because Because of the super self-charge buff, this gadget would obviously be a lot weaker, so this should help him out to make his first gadget still viable. His new second gadget, yes, his second gadget would be removed, would be now Spiky Barrel. Darryl's next super deals double the damage, and it leaves a spiky area on the ground in the 2.33 tile range, which is the same range as the old second gadget Slow Zone had. That slowing down area would also deal 400 damage per second, and the slow would last for 1 second, and that spiky area would last on the floor for 5 seconds. So, trying to explain this in a more simplistic way. You click on the gadget, your next super leaves a tiny area on the floor that deals 400 damage and slows down enemies. So this would give to Darryl some sort of area control, and obviously if he hit someone with this gadget, they would be pretty much dead because they would be slowed down by the spikes that she would leave around the floor until you reach that end of the super, which would be really good to confirm kills. And obviously the double damage to the super, it is a nice bonus. And finally, Darryl would receive a new mythic gear, which, rolling reload. I don't know if that sounds familiar to anyone. So yeah, whenever Darryl uses his super, he instantly reloads 1 ammo. This would help especially to make Darryl a lot more aggressive. So with this more aggressive role, you would probably want like second star power, the mythic gear and damage gear, and cycle as many supers. It would be really cool. Like you would just keep cycling those ammos and the supers a lot easier, and obviously that would deal a lot more damage, and the super would be so much more helpful because the super would tank him a lot to safely approach people. Honestly, with all of these buffs, I hope that Darryl becomes a lot funnier, especially because honestly, his rolling is just not as fun as it used to be, because it just exposes him too much. He's not a good tank, and he's not a good assassin at all as well. So hopefully, Darryl might finally become good with these changes.